The fire type, a type that is one of the most popular amongst fans. But why is that? Is it all just one giant Charizard glaze fest? Maybe. Charizard does have a lot of fans and is the reason why Game Freak always caters towards it. Or is it beloved because trainers have always wanted to wield fire-breathing creatures with intricate designs? Or maybe the most plausible reason is because the typing itself is just very good in battle that allows you to win, which according to FanDuel is the best feeling in the world. So let's take a closer look at fire, the type fueled by the numbers. We'll start by looking at the fire type properties and how it has improved to one of the best typing over the years. When the fire type was firstly introduced, it was super effective against 3 types, while at the same time 4 types were able to resist fire type attacks. On the defensive end, fire had 3 weaknesses and was able to only resist 3 types, making fire one of the most evenly balanced types in Generation 1. But from here on after, the fire type receives nothing but buffs. In Generation 2, its interaction with ice changes, with it now being able to resist it. Also, the steel type was introduced, in which fire is both super effective against it and able to resist steel type attack. This is very valuable to the fire type since steel is the greatest defensive typing, but fire is able to bypass it. In Generation 3, the fire type received a small buff on its innate ability to prevent the burn status. In the first 2 generations, fire was immune to being burned by fire type moves. From Generation 3 and onward, it's immune to getting burned entirely. This stops it from getting burned by moves such as Tri-Attack and Scald, alongside some other attacks as well. Although this buff is very situational, it's a buff nonetheless. The final buff fire receives is in Generation 6, with the introduction of the fairy type. Fire is able to gain a 6 resistance due to the fairy's existence. This new addition allows fire to have the second most amount of resistances across all types, only behind a defensive demon known as steel. If you're interested on how the steel type has developed over the years, go check out my other video that goes into depth of the steel typing. In general, all the property changes that have been stated about the fire type makes it a very compelling choice as it has more positive than negatives, alongside the capability to apply the burn status that cuts Pokemon's attack stat in half, while simultaneously damaging them. Now, let's look at the strength and amount of fire types that are being released over the generations, to see the changes the typing may have faced outside of its battle properties. Just know, the following calculation is only considering regular and regional forms, not megas or alternative forms. The fire type had a very great start in Kanto where it released 12 Pokemon, who on average had a base stat value of 456. This value was high enough to allow fire type as being the 3rd highest average across all types in Kanto. Even if we were to account only for final stage Pokemon, the fire type places in 2nd, for highest average base stat in Kanto, only behind the dragon type because the only final stage dragon in Kanto was Dragonite. A very nice start for the fire type. In Generation 2, we see an additional 10 fire type Pokemon, who are on average slightly weaker than those of Kanto, ending up with an average base stat total of 438. We then head into the Hoenn region, which involves the weakest set of fire Pokemon. Only 6 fire Pokemon were released. This makes it the 2nd fewest of all time, and the average base stat of these 6 Pokemon comes to 413, the lowest average the fire type will ever see. Even when looking at just final stage Pokemon, the Hoenn region fire type was the only region that failed to pass the 500 base stat total mark, leaving Hoenn to claim the title of being the weakest. And no, I don't care about Mega Blaziken or Drought Torkoal. Next up is the Sinnoh region. This was the region that released the fewest amount of fire types at 5. But it turns things around as these Pokemon average out to a base stat total of 478. This is tied for the highest score fire has ever received across all regions. But when counting for just final stage Pokemon, Sinnoh alone stands on top with an average base stat value of 558. The generation of Unova tries to offset the previous 2 generation release of low amount of fire Pokemon by releasing the most fire Pokemon ever at 15. And for this vast amount of Pokemon released, they also had a fairly good base stat average at 446. It aids a lot that both Victini and Reshiram came in the Unova region, allowing Unova to be the only region to release multiple fire types that had a base stat total of 600 or higher. Next up is the Kalos region, which surprisingly released 8 fire type Pokemon. This is a substantial amount considering Kalos released the fewest amount of total Pokemon, causing the Kalos region to lead all regions in largest concentration of fire type Pokemon. The average stat amongst these Pokemon came to 451. The next generation of Alola was basically identical to Kalos, also releasing 8 fire type Pokemon, who on average had a base stat total of 450, one lower than that of Kalos. We then get to Galar, a rather disappointing release of fire Pokemon. releasing only 7, who on average had a base stat total of 430, the second lowest ever, only ahead of the Hoenn region. However, the final region of Paldea tries to offset this negative by releasing 10 fire-type Pokemon, who on average had a base stat total of 478, allowing it to join Sinnoh's record of being the highest. All in all, when accounting for the 4 remaining regional form fire Pokemon, the fire type on average had a base stat total of 450, which places it as being the 6th highest amongst all types, all while having good battle properties and access to the burn condition. But the craziest part is when you look at the stat for just final stage Pokemon. The fire type comes out in 2nd place with an average of 531 base stat across all final stage fire Pokemon. It's only behind Dragon because Dragon has like 20 legendaries aiding them with its scoring. And it really hasn't changed much in terms of strength since Encanto is basically the same, being the 2nd highest base stat average across all final stage Pokemon, with its score also being in the 530s range. All in all, showing the fire type has a very small increase to its stats over the years, due to it mainly receiving buff to its battle properties and because it already had high stats to begin with. But what about the frequency of fire Pokemon? Similar to the stat total, and looking at this graph, it seems as though the fire type has remained consistent in terms of releasing Pokemon, with there being about 9 to 10 fire type Pokemon every region. This allows the rate at which we see fire types at about 8% of all Pokemon in Kanto and remain 8% of all Pokemon now. Even with just the measly 4 regional form Pokemon, it still flutters around the 8% mark, with 85 out of 1080 regular and regional form Pokemon being affiliated with the fire type. So now we know that the fire type has good battle properties and good stats, but what playstyle does the fire type achieve? Due to its insane offense and defense properties, it can actually be played in any style. Other types such as ice and poison don't get the same luxury, as their properties normally gravitate them towards playing only one of these styles. This further allows the fire type to see usages with Pokemon that have a balanced offense and defense stats, since they aren't fully reliant on either one or the other. They also can wield the power of the sun to aid them in offense, while also having access to the status condition of burn, which can further help them defensively. But alongside all that, what moves does the fire type use in battle? For special attack, the main choice is almost always the reliable flamethrower, with a base power of 90, 100 accuracy, and the chance to inflict burn. As for physical attacks, the most common attack is Flare Blitz, with an astounding base power of 120, 100 accuracy, chance to burn, and thawing you out of freeze. However, it does give you recoil damage, so you have to be wary of that. However, the weird thing is that Flamethrower, despite being the most known fire special attack, isn't really seen much in competitive, and sometimes gets replaced with other fire type attacks that deals more damage or have secondary effects, even if those moves have lower accuracy. Flare Blitz, however, is still the go-to physical attack for fire type Pokemon, but I'll go into more detail about this when I talk about the fire type in competitive. But before that, I want to look at the fire type dual typing. Despite it already being a favorable type, let's see if its strengths are boosted by its types it's paired up with, or if it's held back. For this part, I will be comparing final stage dual type fire Pokemon with typing stated in Wolfie's video about all type combination. In his video, the worst 3 types the fire type could be paired up with is rock, electric, and ice. Only 3 final stage fire Pokemon have these typing out of 35, all of which have the fire and rock typing. If including for alternate forms, fire, electric, and fire ice do both have 1 Pokemon. Although both are pretty weird to what one would expect a Pokemon with such a typing to be like. Rotom Heat Form has Levitate, which nullifies its quad weakness, which it's supposed to have. And Galarian Darmanitan is one of the scariest glass cannon Pokemon in the franchise. So despite being bad types, they do everything else correct to prevent themselves from being labeled as bad Pokemon. As for good typing, the best 3 were Fire Dark, Fire Fairy, and Fire Psychic. This combination was seen a total of 6 times across final stage dual type fire Pokemon, none of which being Fire Fairy, since that combination doesn't exist at all. And of these 6, we see. Anyways, what we conclude about the fire type dual typing is that like everything else, it's in favor for the fire type to do well. So now let's combine all the things that have been discussed thus far to see how the fire type performs when it comes to a competitive aspect. Just know the data collected for this part is from Peakalytics and was extracted on April 30th, 2025. Pokemon's usages could have increased or decreased from when you are watching this video. I will start as always with the Uber tier. In this tier, we only see 2 fire Pokemon rank in the top 25 for highest usage rate, that being the bulky Ho-Oh and the Paldean starter Skellydirge. Both of these Pokemon have similar playstyle, which is to not get decimated by the number 1 ranked Pokemon in Uber, Koraidon, both of which can resist its boosted Flare Blitz and fighting type attacks. Also, both of these Pokemon can attempt to burn Koraidon, which absolutely cripples its offensive powers. The burn condition is also why Ho-Oh is one of the most seen Pokemon in Ubers, as it can cut physical attack in half with burn, all while having one of the highest special defense to mitigate special attacks. Alongside this, it's also able to restore its health with Regenerator. And like I mentioned prior in this video, these special attackers don't use Flamethrower as their main source of stab damage. Ho-Oh opts for Sacred Fire since it has a 50% chance to burn, and Skeledirge uses Torch Song, which allows it to boost its special attack. In the end, the fire type decided to take up a more defensive role in this format, subduing strong physical attackers with the burn status. This is possibly because the more physically built fire type offensive mons aren't available in the current Scarlet and Violet games. In the monotype format, a format where all Pokemon of a team must share a common type, it's able to see a full team composition on the 50th most used Pokemon. This places it in the middle for most used type in monotype, with most of the fire type scene actually being affiliated with types that's being used more than itself, making fire play a great role as being a secondary type rather than a primary type. However, in the OU tier, the fire type isn't doing too hot. Like in the Uber format, it also has 2 placement in the top 25. However, those 2 placement are the final 2 slots, meaning it has no appearance for the top 20 most used Pokemon in the OU tier. A major reason for this is that 4 of the top 7 most used Pokemon in this tier uses the ground type attack, something fire is weak to, making it difficult to see them get used. And since there's so many ways to defeat them in this format, it's mainly just used for offense. However, in OU doubles, the move Earthquake is only seen once as the most used ground attack by any Pokemon in the top 50 for usage rate, that being Ursaluna. And since this devastating ground attack isn't being used, that leaves room for fire to run rampant, being seen 5 times in the top 30 for most used, taking part in both offensive and defensive playstyles. In the VGC format, which incorporates a bit more Pokemon, including some legendaries, only the top 3 fire types in OU doubles remain in the top 30, all of which are in the top 20. All of them are paired with good typing and have phenomenal stats that aids them heavily in battle. Chi-Yu and Ogerpon have great offensive stats paired with abilities that further increase their total damage output, while Incineroar has good overall stats alongside ability and moves that supports the team greatly. All of this put together makes Fire a very desirable type in competitive Pokemon. But what do you guys think? Do you think the fire type dominance will ever get extinguished to one that is more balanced and equal to other types, or will it always be benefited in every factor of Pokemon due to its insane popularity and remain the type fueled by the numbers?